There we go. Okay, we are now recording. And unless there are any more happy dollars, anyone? Okay, I'd like to move to our guest of honor, Tom Kabat. I've already done his introduction. I assume the rest of you have already read who are coming late. Tom, I'd like to turn things over to you if that's okay.
All right, well, thank you very much, Maurice. And it's great to see everyone. And it's so fun to hear the background noises. I hear birds. I think, is that your place, Maurice?
I think so. We have a lot of birds here.
Yep, reminds me of good times in my childhood. I was an Army brat on Fort Shafter when I was a little kid and over in Oahu. And so that was lots of fun. And then had to move away when my dad got out of the service. So now we get to go back and visit now and then. But most of my time these days is taken up volunteering and working on projects on the climate problem. It's just keeps growing though, and it feels like we're way behind on it. And so we're working with different groups about how do we accelerate the pace of the kinds of improvements we need to do to keep up with what the scientists have told us. So I'm going to switch over to a little PowerPoint. It has some pictures, but there's a lot of slides that are just text, and I'll talk to you about them. It's most of the beginning is about the ideas and data going on in some of the climate change, and then probably the second 2/3 of it, we can get into some solutions that you might find interesting for your own homes or maybe even for club activities. So we could talk about the possibilities there. So if I can do my screen share, yep. And find the right thing. Not quite seeing which is the right one here. Wrong thing. Oh, there it is. Okay. All right. So today I'm here to talk with you a bit about the climate challenge and kind of help look at it as kind of a worldwide legacy challenge where we're all essentially going to be able to set our own legacy here. And about a couple of years ago, they told us we had 10 years. Now we've got less than 9 years left, according to the United Nations scientists. We've got less than 9 years to substantially change the ways that we're harming the climate. Otherwise, we kind of go around the bend, and certain positive feedback loops, and positive is not a good thing, but we run out of ice that quits reflecting the sun's heat, and so things just get hotter and that kind of thing. So stuff takes off. Also, methane starts emerging from the tundra more than it is now. So those are the kinds of tipping points we want to try to avoid by looking at how do we do some early action, and how can we as individuals help policymakers get that started, and how can we do it for our own families and show some leadership there. All right, so that Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and can you see my cursor?
Yes, okay,
we can. Thanks. Yep, so they're telling us, essentially it's not an all or nothing game. It's gonna happen along a continuum. And so every bit of the warming matters. And for example, every 1/10 of a degree matters. And that they tell us that 2 degrees Celsius has 4 times as much damage and suffering as 1.5 degrees Celsius rise. So that little 1/2 degree doesn't sound like much, but the amount of damage and suffering is 4 times as bad for that 1/2 degree change. Well, when we start looking at that, then it also turns out that speed matters. So every year matters. All the decisions we're able to make matter. And every ton of CO2 emitted into the atmosphere is cumulative, because CO2 is a very stable gas. once it's emitted into the atmosphere, it pretty much doesn't react with anything. The thing that takes it out of the atmosphere is photosynthesis. And if we're running low on plants or plankton, we end up with less photosynthesis going on. So it gets harder and harder to remove it. So this is a kind of a cumulative problem. And then that leads to the idea that, well, all of our actions matter because they're all marginal. They all contribute to the tons. And if our actions matter, we've got to start generating the personal will among ourselves to change. We have to sort of change the regular habits we've had and the regular inertia we've had about how we replace devices. And then we can demonstrate that change through our actions. And that helps generate the political will that policymakers will implement some policies that changes everybody else's default actions. You know, essentially they can take the bad item off the shelf and then we quit causing the problem. And so if we can personally make a few changes to demonstrate that living without the bad thing works, and then policymakers can say, yeah, why don't we all live without the bad thing? So that's a great way to magnify your impact by just starting to participate in change. All right, then back to what the IPCC told us. They said we have to pursue these policies to change everything within 9 years that are rapid, far-reaching, and unprecedented. And I worked for city government for 30 years. And those 3 words were the opposite of how we tended to act. We always wanted to go at a steady pace. We didn't want to go too fast and make mistakes. We wanted to go incrementally. We didn't really want to swoop in and do big changes because what if we were wrong? And we always wanted to follow other precedents and wait for someone else to do things. But we really don't have time to do things slow or in small steps or just repeat what we've done before. So we've already kind of used up the luxury of delay. So we really have to get on it. And now it turns out that prudent means to be acting fast and in big ways. So that's different than when I was a city employee. And so we've got to change the way we're doing things. All right, so meanwhile, while we're learning some of this, the science keeps evolving about what's going on in the climate. And so the situation is changing. It's hard to keep up with the facts, but this one thing caught my eye in a study that came out this summer. It's now likely, there's about a 66% chance or 2/3 chance that temperatures by the end of the century will be 2.6 to 3.9 degrees above the historic averages. So really that's telling me that our individual actions matter now, especially if we can leverage them into policy. And folks see what we're doing and they get more comfortable having everyone do what we do that we find makes sense. So here's a little graph to try to relate these temperatures. So this is global temperature rise on the bottom axis, 1 degree Celsius, 2 degrees, 3 degrees Celsius, 4 and 5. And that's temperature rise since the late 1800s. And there we are, we've had 0.9 degrees of temperature rise. So the little UR here for last year. And then this upper axis is the amount of damage and suffering compared to the past year. So there we are at this 1x means 1 times last year. So we've had 0.9 degrees and we've had as much suffering and I don't know, I don't know how it's been in Hilo, but here in California, it was a rough year for climate problems and wildfires. We had 4 times the amount of, the historic record of wildfire damage. Massive fires in the past couple of years, dozens of people killed in these fires each time, power outages from the fires and bad air quality, people dying of bad air quality. So things have gotten bad and that's where we are on the suffering scale. We're at that little bit. So the Paris Accord has an aspiration to try to hold the warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. They've got a goal to hold it at 2. So they've set their goal in writing to go at 2 and they'd really like to adopt policies that'll get it to stay down at 1.5 degrees Celsius. They've collected pledges and targets from the member countries who signed into that, and we may re-sign into that soon. And so these are the pledges and targets they've collected. There's enough to keep us at about 2.5 degrees. The policies already in place are about 2.7 degrees. If we enact them all, they would only keep us, they would kind of help us top out at that much. If we had no policies, just our business as usual would have us over 4 degrees. But the recent report is saying, well, it's looking like there's a 2/3 chance the climate is headed into this zone of being between 2.6 and 3.9 degrees. And so the damage that our children and grandchildren may see is, say, 15 times as bad every year as last year to 25 times. So this is massive. And it's a continuum. It's not all or nothing. If we can just work our way down, we can really reduce this damage. So we need to be considering doing the kinds of personal actions that give strength and fortitude to policymakers so they can help us, help move everyone along to go with us. And so I like to show this interesting little model from a guy named Alan Atkinson. It's his amoeba model of change. And an amoeba is the little single-celled organism that has a membrane, and it basically reaches out kind of one little arm, like a starfish arm type thing, after some food it sees. And he draws an analogy for the amoeba of change for how change comes about in society. And what he says is that there's some innovation that some innovator sees, and they start reaching for it and trying to adopt it and experiment with it and try to convey what it's like and sell it, try to get people to engage in it. But these innovators who are able to see these innovations, a lot of them are not that great at communicating. So they're not really able to make it mainstream. This is the control center down here. If control can adopt it, then it becomes mainstream. But so the innovators are not typically these great communicators. They need folks like you guys, and you may be innovators, and you may also be change agents who are able to interpret information you get from innovators and convey it to other folks or transformers who are able to adjust it and make it more applicable to real life. A lot of times these innovators are off in the blue sky, and other people are grounded in the real world problems. So it's kind of like taking several types of people interacting to try to adopt an idea and make it working for the mainstream, and then get the policymakers to adopt it. Meanwhile, there's other types of folks back here, reactionaries who may want to resist change. And then there may be activists who are poking it along, trying to move change. So there's lots of roles to play in this thing, and the amoeba tries to move forward. And I always try to encourage people to look up Atkinson's Amoeba of Change, or listen to his TED Talk. If you Google Alan Atkinson TED Talk, you hear an 18-minute great talk about some of his models of change. But I kind of like to say it's probably a lot more fun up here at the front. And so to the extent we can, we may want to try to move up in that amoeba and do what we can to advance the flow. So now we're going to try to start looking at ways to avert climate chaos and avert going around the bend on some of those feedback loops. And it does look to me like, for us personally, it feels like this in my life. It's a worldwide legacy challenge, because I've already laid up a big legacy of carbon dioxide emissions, from driving, from flying. I used to eat beef, and that's got a pretty good footprint to it too, or a big footprint. And so I've moved on to other meats with a smaller one, but they still have some carbon footprint. So I've already left, in a way, a carbon dioxide legacy. And like I said, that gas is a really stable. It's going to be up in the atmosphere for, say, 1,000 years until it's absorbed by plants that come back, or more plankton, or whatever we can get to recover to take it out again. Once it's up there, it is stable, and it is an insulating blanket in a way. It's the shape of the molecule is such that it just oscillates at the right frequency to plug a hole in the rest of the atmosphere that the Earth uses to radiate excess heat through. The carbon dioxide is a cork in our thermal equilibrium management system. And once carbon dioxide kind of corks that area, we've got a problem. There's another cork area and methane corks. So we've got these two gases that are some of our major problem in the greenhouse gas problem. So back to the worldwide legacy, essentially we all have a chance to make a difference and to set an example. And those examples can be pretty meaningful if you start interacting with other folks and show them what you can do and give them hope and show them progress. And talking a little bit with Maurice earlier a few weeks ago, it was fun for me to learn about the Rotary organization and the history and your approach to problems and setting an example and making solutions. And so that's why I thought this would be a good fit to talk about what's needed in the climate problem. But like it or not, we're all choosing our legacies on this kind of action continuum. Someone may be in denial, and it's painful, and so it's easy to fall into denial on it and be a foot dragger. And others, sometimes I find myself a little bit frozen in the headlights. I look at the problem and I get frightened. And sometimes I'm able to participate in policies that other people set up. That's pretty easy. And then I try to be an early adopter, and then I try to share what I'm learning with leaders and to essentially try to be a bit of a leader by example. Well, okay, you guys probably know this pretty well. We all want satisfying lives, and the things that lead to satisfaction are things that you guys are already involved in, like tackling challenges, joining up and being part of bigger movements, doing your part in those movements, being part of that solution, and showing leadership or engagement in the solution, and that's earning respect. And I noticed that in your meeting so far, that you guys respect each other, lean on each other, and interact in a great way. And the other thing, and I don't know if it's just me or other people, but I'm hoping to be remembered for the good things I've done. So I'm investing my time and energy and resources into good projects, demonstrating some leadership and sharing, trying to help others join in and help others leapfrog what I do. So now I'm getting, that's kind of the problem setup and motivation. And so now I'm going to talk about one avenue towards the solution. And there's no one silver bullet in the climate problem, but there is silver buckshot. So it's going to take a lot of solutions. And so if this one doesn't feel right for you, you may find another one that is going to be very useful, like working on diet. But I'm going to talk a little bit about energy and electrification that leverages Hawaii's renewable portfolio standards for clean electricity. So what electrification is, and we call it beneficial electrification, it is using electricity to do what fossil fuels have done, so we don't have to use as much fossil fuels. And some of the electric devices we use are so efficient, like heat pumps that I'll describe soon. They're so efficient that they only take a little bit of electricity to do a whole lot of water heating. And so it's not like a resistance water heater that's pretty common. It's like an air conditioner that grabs heat out of the room and jacks it up to the hot water temperature and uses that heat to heat the tank of hot water. So you get a twofer. You get cooling and dehumidification from the heat pump, and you get hot water. And so having one of these heat pump water heaters in your garage or some part of your house where you didn't mind it, it would be cooling and dehumidifying that area and making hot water. Whereas if you just put a resistance water heater there, it's losing some heat and it's in a way just warming that area a little bit. Anyway, so that's one example of electrification. The other one, you've been seeing electric cars. They make they're very efficient at converting energy to motion, about 90% efficient, and compared to our 25% efficient gasoline motors. So they can take us a lot further. And then, people say, well, but if all our power is being made from fossil fuels, do you really get anywhere? Well, with these very high efficiency devices, you can actually leverage into better efficiency, even with a power plant making the electricity, but it doesn't have to be that bad because we can put solar on our own roofs. And the state of Hawaii and your island is also, just getting ahead of things. I think you're at about 50% renewable electric content now, and only 50% fossil fired. So adding more to the electric load is making the utility incorporate more renewables to keep up with the renewable portfolio standard, to meet the target and grow the renewable fraction up towards 100% as the state law has it targeted. Anyway, so that's why I work on electrification, and we've got similar RPS renewable portfolio standards here in California, and we're also following Hawaii's lead. In fact, I think there are 14 states now following Hawaii's lead to be targeting 100% fossil-free economy, or 100% carbon neutral. They may still use some fossil fuels, but they'll want to sequester some of the emissions from that. So it used to be more efficient to burn gas or oil directly in our cars rather than in power plants, but four things changed. The fossil power plants that, I've been in the utility industry for more than 30 years, they've become much more efficient. They used to be 25% efficient. Now we've got a lot of them here in California that are over 50% efficient at converting fuel into electricity. And our state renewable portfolio standards are limiting the fraction of fossil power. So that means it's increasing the fraction of renewable power. So, the amount of fuel it takes to make an average kilowatt hour just keeps shrinking. And then heat pumps and electric vehicles. Heat pumps have gotten much better at delivering heat with their variable speed electronic drive. They're up to 4 times the efficiency of electric resistance. So the net result is now electric powered heat pump heat for hot water or space heat is 2 to 4 times cleaner than fossil fired heat, even oil. And here's a little graph showing the state's renewable portfolio standards here at the top edge of the blue line and Hawaii's. So you've gotten ahead of the state, and you're up around 50% renewable content from what I saw on the website. And there's a little link down there. I'll give you the slides so you can follow the link if you want to research a little more about how the different islands are doing on their progress. But anyway, there's the chart here. It's also shown that's the trajectory of how they want to pursue the renewables path and green up the grid even more and more. But look at that, they're already ahead out towards 2035. Well, so some of what I'm going to talk about is just taking advantage of this energy transition. And so looking at home energy and trying to see, okay, what are the actual things we can do? And noting that the electric supply is cleaner now, and it's going to be getting cleaner than that in the future. It's already created this kind of a green stepping stone. And so with this carbon-free energy or low carbon energy now and getting better and better, it gives us the stepping stone to secure healthy fossil-free homes. And that can be our legacy, is that we participate in that and convert our homes and our vehicles over to electric. We don't have time to really sit by and wait for that 2050 date when everything's 100% and then electrify. We actually have to start now, and we can make a lot of good progress now, and it matters. So, the benefits will grow too. You put in the devices now and the device gets cleaner and cleaner. But I'm really impressed that Hawaii's action to adopt that 100% clean energy target inspired so many states. Massachusetts, just a week or so ago, is one of the latest to adopt that kind of a target. Let's see. Oh, well, okay. I launched in here my favorite machines for doing this electrification. I'll have a picture or two in a minute, but I like this Rad Wagon, a low-cost electric cargo bike. Cost me about $1,600. I just plug it into a regular outlet and it charges up in an hour, probably enough electricity to help me go 20 or 30 miles. And it's a cargo bike. So it really is a great way to experiment with replacing a car and, dropping your car fleet by one if you're able to. And so my wife and I have always gotten by with just one car, but the cargo bike really helps. So I can do the shopping on it and I used to take my daughter to school on it. I had a pedal cargo bike earlier. But anyway, that's a fun one here. And then here's heat pump water heater. I really like the 15 amp version of that. And they make 15 and 30 amp versions. But by using this 15 amp version that takes less power, it frees up more space on the electrical panel. And that's part of this thing that I call the amp diet. By being careful about which devices you pick and using, say, the low amp version of that water heater, it leaves you a bunch of space to do faster car charging. And so it's easier to convert into electric driving by making the water heater decision right. If you've got a resistance water heater now, it's probably, the common one is 30 amps. And so you could be replacing your existing 30 amp resistance water heater with this 15 amp heat pump water heater that'll save you 3/4 of the energy, but also free up half the circuit. Anyway, the hardware cost on that's about $1,300, and they run on 240 volt power. Another thing I really like is it's a window air conditioner that inside it has a reversing valve that reverses the flow of the refrigerant. So in my climate here in the Bay Area, I'm near San Francisco, we've got cool winters, and so I just turn that thing into heating mode. And so what it does is it just runs like it's an air conditioner. It runs like an air conditioner backwards. It cools off the outside air. It'll pull in 45 degree air, cool it off to 35, and grab that 10 degrees of heat out of it, jack it up to a higher temperature, and push it into the house. I end up seeing 100 degree or 120 degree air coming out of the thing, but it's transferring the heat, not the air. So it's extracting energy from the outdoor air, which the air feels cold to my skin, but it's still way above absolute zero. It's way above the temperature of deep space. And so the heat pump is easily able to grab heat out of what feels to me like cold air and put it across there. And we all have heat pumps in our kitchen. It's the freezer or refrigerator, but in the freezer, it's grabbing heat out of a 0 Fahrenheit ice box. And it's taking that heat and it's blowing it across your toes at 90 degrees Fahrenheit. You feel that little warm breeze coming up from under the fridge. So that's an example of a heat pump. And then just combining them or arranging them so they can do space heating or water heating is the new innovation. And then there's also a portable heat pumps. These ones that have 2 little hoses and they've got a couple of wheels. They cost about $600. They plug in a socket. They can do cooling and dehumidification, and they can pipe their condensate out the window. And so it's kind of a neat little device. And if you need any heating, it can do heating too. It just has that reversing valve inside it. I installed one of these do-it-yourself, so DIY, brand, Mr. Cool brand mini split heat pump. And that's the kind of heat pump where you see a little head unit on the wall. I'll show you in a few minutes. I've got one behind me. And so it does the heating and cooling in my house. It cost about $1,500 to buy it. I got the smaller one that's only 120 volts. My buddy Amy, she got the bigger one that was 240 volts, but we just paired up to do her house and then do mine. And that was real easy. The other thing I really like is there's a condensing washer dryer machine, one machine that you put dry, dirty clothes into, and it washes them and dries them in the same machine using a kind of a heat pump dehumidifier to extract the moisture out of them. But I don't have to go and move the clothes over midway through. One machine does it all. And it costs about $1,800, frees up much more than that value of floor space in my house. And it plugs into the regular washer socket. So I don't need to use the dryer socket. So that freed up another 30 amps that could be used either for heat pumps or for car charging. Or for the induction range. I bought one of these Frigidaire induction style cooking ranges that uses an oscillating magnetic field to heat up the ferrous metal in the pot. And so it directly heats the pot instead of heating a coil that heats the pot. It heats the pot instead of anything else. And so it's very efficient and fast and very controllable. I think it was a star in the recent Consumer Reports. I got the Frigidaire Gallery model. It was only 900 bucks, and I put in a new 240 volt circuit to it, 40 amps. And so we're really loving that because now our kitchen doesn't smell like gas anymore. And I can put things right on the cool cooktop while we're cooking. So I actually have a lot more room in the kitchen. You know, I never used to be able to use that big gas grate that was over our gas cooktop because everything would fall through it if I put a spoon on there or something, or things would catch fire if it was a wooden spoon. So now with this cool glass cooktop, we actually can move the ingredients right up next to the pot and do prep work right there. And the last thing on the list, there's this interesting brand called Legion Solar that has what they say is a permitless solar. So all the regular solar, and I'm a volunteer solar installer with a nonprofit, and we put in regular solar that people have to get a permit for. But this other one was intriguing to me, just thinking about the situation in Hawaii, that this Legion Solar is a do-it-yourself thing where the system plugs in through a wall outlet, and it has monitoring equipment on it that's sensing whether you're net consuming power in the house or not. And so it just shuts itself down. If you're not using enough electricity, since it doesn't have permission to export it, it just turns off its generation. But if you've done a bunch of these other things here that you run during the day, then you are using electricity in the day, and this little do-it-yourself solar without a permit would be able to be putting power back into a socket that finds its way through your electric panel back to all the other loads. So I put it in there as kind of an interesting device. Anyway, there's a picture of my electric cargo bike and taking away my big old gas stove that was kind of smelly. And so I hauled it away to the recycle center, and we felt pretty good about that. Here's a picture of a heat pump water heater. And it like I said, it's basically this top little part is essentially an air conditioner. It's bringing in outside air, or garage air, or whatever your water heater is, and it grabs some energy out and it blows out cool dry air, about 10 degrees cooler than it went in. And it uses the heat it extracts, and it runs it down through a refrigerant coil that's wrapped around this tank. And so it heats the inner tank there. And so, I was happy to get rid of my gas tank water heater. In your area, you might have electric resistance water heaters. This thing is about 3 or 4 times as efficient as the old water heaters. But again, I do like the 15 amp versions if you can find them. If you need that space, the ampacity in your electric panel for other projects like swimming pools and faster car charging, et cetera, you might want to special order the 15 amp versions of these things instead of the 30 amp. The next thing coming up in about a year, manufacturers, a couple of them are going to make 120 volt plug in the wall versions of these heat pump water heaters. So they won't have resistors. If you see these 2 little bulged out spots on here, that's just the normal resistors of an electric water heater. So these heat pump water heaters, we call them either heat pump or hybrids. If you hear the term hybrid water heater, it means not that it uses gasoline also, but it uses heat pump or resistance, because it could fire up these 2 elements in here and just heat your water with resistance the old fashioned way. So I've got one of these things, and I just, it's got a control panel. I just pick heat pump only, and that's always enough for us. We're 2 people and a 50-gallon water heater. We never run out. So here's a thing that may be applicable to some of you who may have space heating. It's just converting from having separate devices, like some people have a wall furnace and a window air conditioner or some other air conditioning. But for small scale projects, one thing you can do is go from 2 separate devices to, this is the picture of the kind I have, the window heat pump that just goes in the window. The other one is what you see often in hotels. It's a through the wall heat pump. They call them P-tax or something like that. But it's a built-in thing through the wall instead of the window. And then I've recently done that mini split, the do-it-yourself one, and they say it's a ductless mini split. So what it does is it has little copper refrigerant lines, and they're insulated, about 25 feet long, that go to that indoor heat exchanger. And so they circulate in the winter, hot refrigerant to the indoor thing. And so that's what's heating my house right now. But in the summer, when I've got the heat waves going, it just goes into cooling mode, and it air conditions and dehumidifies my house. And so that's really nice and quiet and well controlled. And it's got a variable speed drive. So it just oscillates to get to the right power level. Whereas this cheap $400 window heat pump, it's only got one speed. Well, two, counting off. So it's either going full bore and it's kind of noisy, or it's off. The variable speed mini split is nice and quiet the whole time, and it tries to modulate itself to really match my energy needs for the house. Okay, other combined machines. Here's a standard washer and dryer. And I was telling you, I like this combined washer dryer unit. And so LG makes one that's a little over 4 cubic feet. So that's one of the bigger ones. There's lots of them that are under 3 cubic feet, but a lot of us are, hooked on bigger loads of laundry for some reason. Well, I self-identify as a laundry American, maybe. But using one of these combined washer dryers, where you put the dry, dirty clothes in, and 3 hours later, or 2 or 3, you get out dry, clean clothes without having to visit it in between and never leaving a moldy batch in there, because this thing just, completes the job for you, whether you remember or not. And it frees up a 220 volt circuit, since it just plugs into the regular 120 volt washer outlet. So that's kind of cool. And then in our house, we had a gas cooktop. We went over to the induction cooktop, but it's really good too. If you can save a bunch of amps by using the combined device, a range that has the oven under the cooktop. It's funny, it saves a whole nother circuit in the electric panel, and that can be real useful for other electrification projects. Okay, a little table of how things have changed since I started my utility career in the 1980s. So different end uses, we call them, like transportation, water heating, and the dirty version of what we had. Basically, we still have this in cars. For transportation, the carbon emissions from a gallon of gasoline, everyone talks about the 19 pounds of CO2 that comes out the tailpipe, but they really need to include the 8 pounds per gallon that happen at the refinery and transporting the gasoline to the station. Together, it's got 27 pounds of carbon pollution per gallon. Our old solution was just bicycle. But nowadays we've got other things like the electric car or electric cargo bikes, other great solutions, and there's still bicycles around. So anyway, then in water heating, if you're using natural gas, and I see some parts of the island do have some natural gas or some kind of petroleum gas, it's about 12 pounds per therm of gas of tailpipe emissions, plus an upstream 8 pounds per therm of emissions from the couple of % leakage of methane. That little bits of methane leaking upstream has an outsized proportion on the total environmental impact. But together it's about 20 pounds per therm of heat, 100,000 BTUs. And so it's kind of a bad fuel to use, kind of rough. So it's really nice to electrify, get away from it. In the old days, we would use solar thermal with some gas backup. Here in my climate, we could only get to about 60% solar. You guys probably can do better than that, but not that much better. And then with heat pump water heating, we can do the whole job with the heat pump water heater. When I say it's 93% clean, that's if you get up to the 100% clean power portfolio, except for transmission losses. So there's a little bit of transmission losses that here in California, they still power with fossil-fired power. They haven't made a rule yet that says they have to clean that up. So our cleanest power we're getting nowadays is 93% clean, and that's what my community gets. Anyway, so it goes on, but basically things have progressed from old compromises that weren't that clean to now fully electric very clean solutions. This is just a picture from a group that I want to encourage you to think about emulating or forming. Sunwork.org is a nonprofit. I'm on the board of directors there, and what we do is we train volunteers to install low-cost solar on other nonprofits or on people's houses. If somebody's electrifying their house, we'll install low-cost solar there. Because we're doing the labor and we're a nonprofit, it's pretty cheap. It's just the cost of materials plus $1 a watt for the overhead and all that. But it's a fun way to learn about solar energy. This is our founder and the team leader. And then these are just fellow volunteers, but we're just laying out a big system on the local church. And we basically end up learning both about solar and about electrification, because the solar gets connected together with wires and a steel conduit. So that's how I learned enough about circuits to get confident to do my own home wiring. Okay, so basically this transition is on. The scientists are telling us we don't have much time. We can't keep putting in the problem. We have to switch over to putting in the solution. So the transition is going to build up speed and become pretty noticeable as we kind of get over denial and we become rational about looking at the problem. And you've all heard that term, first stop the bleeding, as though we've accidentally got a cut. But when we think of our homes, we should first stop cutting ourselves by installing problems. We should figure out, how do we arrange things so I won't install another gas device or buy another gas car? And so, some pledge that I've kind of worked out for myself is that I will no longer buy any fossil-fired cars or gas appliances. I just won't, because I know they're stranded. I know they're part of the problem. I know it's long past time to stop. So they're obsolete and their emissions linger for hundreds of years. So I won't strand those things. I won't put in things that have to be removed. And so I see why, and I care about people and the planet and climate progress, so I'm going to be motivated. So I'm going to make the arrangements to make it cheaper to follow the pledge. So that, in my house, that meant, looking at the water heater and thinking, it doesn't have that many years left. I'm going to plan its replacement. I'm not going to wait for it to break and get into an emergency where I have to call a plumber and he doesn't have one on the truck. I order the thing and put the circuit in and get it taken care of. So the idea is to not use, I won't keep using excuses that I forgot to make the arrangements. I'm going to have the discipline to go make the arrangements to get ready to do the electrification. And then I'll try to replace these things before they burn out, so I never get put in that emergency position. But there's lots of other triggering events and then smart responses. So what happens if, some of these events, if you like money or fun, it turns out that leasing or buying an electric car, or even car sitting for a friend, can be a fun way, a way to improve your fun and save money. I was surprised at how economic electric vehicles were in each, if you look at the parallel luxury classes, so you don't compare a super Tesla against, some, Jeep or, some other different class of car. If you go luxury car to luxury car or utility car to utility car, just compare across the right class, what you end up noticing on the full cost of ownership is that electric vehicles save so much in engine maintenance as well as fuel cost that they are more economical than buying another gas car. They may have a first cost premium, but they over the course of the lifetime, they are the lower cost solution. And if you need a long range,
I just want to let you know we're heading up on our time limit. We
right.
try to end at 1, and we only have a couple minutes.
Yep.
Would you be willing to take a couple questions?
Yes, I certainly am. Yeah, and so I just wanted
nobody's going to say anything.
Oh,
Can I just
okay.
ask Can I just ask a couple questions then, if nobody's going to pipe in? I have a personal But when we remodeled our house, I have a solar hot water heater, so it's going on 20 years old now. Is it feasible for one of these heat pump kind of situations to just replace the hot water heater with one of these new ones? Am I better off that way? I couldn't follow.
Yeah, you definitely, so your solar water heater probably has a backup heater that it feeds.
Yeah, it has a hot water heater that kind of trips in when if you don't make it up from the solar, it'll click on and make up the difference. And
right. And so the heat pump water heater would be great at doing that. And so you wouldn't need a very big heat pump water heater either. They make 40 or 50 gallon versions towards the small end. You might
remove the whole solar panel off the roof and the pump and all that stuff.
Oh yeah. So right at my house, I have solar photovoltaics. I don't have the hot water panels, but I put in photovoltaics that feed into my electric panel, and then I put in a heat pump water heater that takes out of my electric panel. I call the whole thing dry solar water heating. So it's a lot cheaper. Nowadays here in California.
I have a cabin and I just put in a hot water solar heater too. I'm wondering why they didn't recommend something like this instead.
Yeah, this is
less than a year ago.
Yeah, this is really the low cost way to use solar to heat water.
To do the voltaics and then run it through and then pick it up. Yeah, that seems simpler and neater.
Right, right. It's because there's the thing about photovoltaics and a heat pump water heater, they're both made in a factory, very easily. Whereas the rooftop solar thing, that's all hand done on the roof. That's a lot of labor out in the sunshine, and it's hard, and there's a lot of plumbing and insulating of pipes. You still have to run sensor wires. It's just so much labor. So here in the Bay Area, it's $10,000 to do a solar water heater, but it's probably only $4,000 to do a heat pump water heater with two of the PV panels added in.
Yeah, I have the PV already also.
Yep. All right. Yeah.
We're just after 1 o'clock.
Okay.
I just would you mind staying on for a little bit in case anybody else would like to stay and ask more questions?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to give an opportunity for everybody to jump off without feeling like they're ditching out soon or whatever. So I will lead us through the four-way test of the things we think, do, or say. First, is it the truth? Second, is it fair to all concerned? Third, will it build goodwill and better friendship? Fourth, is it beneficial to all concerned? And fifth, have fun. Thank you everyone for joining us. Please stay on if you have some more questions. I know I do. But feel free to go about your day. Thank you so much for being here, and look forward to seeing you next week. Aloha.
Wait, great presentation. Yeah, great. Wait, hold on. Let me just take another picture. Bring your son in, Kat.
What's that?
Oh, sorry. Let me just take a picture.
Oh, Charlene's trying to get a picture of everyone together before they jump off. She wanted Kat to get her son to come into the frame.
Hey, got you. Thank you. So cute. I got him.
Well, I have one more question. If
yeah,
anybody, just in general with this intrigue with this heat pump thing, because I know on the mainland they trying to use more and more. But I'm wondering, with us, we have this active volcano. You probably don't have to drill very far to get a really significant delta T on this thing, yeah. And that's what kind of spins the whole thing, yeah. The change in temperature from the surface to the wherever with the drill one rather than the air one you're talking about, the more
right. Yeah, the whole ground source drilled heat pump things, in my climate, they don't make any sense because labor and drilling is so expensive, and our air temperatures aren't too extreme. So that air source heat pumps work great here. They work even better in Hawaii. And plus you enjoy the cooler, drier air output from it. Whereas here it's a problem half the year and it's a benefit half the year. Although I don't know, about how shallow your thermal resource is there.
Yeah, it just seems like drilling wouldn't be that expensive.
Right.
It's
Is it?
You know?
Are you talking geothermal, Peter, or is this something
Yeah,
different?
on a small basis. They do it on the mainland and doing it for 20 years or more than that.
Right.
You kind of drill and you just put a loop, and it's just you make use of the change in temperature and the two different glycol or whatever. It's some kind of fluid that changes easily.
Right. They use a volatile fluid. So they use it.
Yeah.
Right. And so they'll make like what is it? Oh, I forgot which one it is, but it's essentially like steam. And so they've got a sealed vapor loop.
Right. Ammonia is the traditional.
You didn't talk about airplanes, but all of us are tethered to the airplanes here. So.
Right. And electric airplanes don't have the range except for inner island so far. Yeah. So long distance air travel is one of the big challenges. And so different companies are working on some, more bio-based fuels, or there's, or I hear talk of hydrogen eventually. It's just nobody's making any clean hydrogen right now. We only make dirty hydrogen. We strip natural gas. We strip the carbon off it, make CO2, and then take the 4 hydrogen molecules and make hydrogen. So that's how almost all our hydrogen's made right now. Someday in the future, maybe we'll make clean hydrogen, but yeah, I agree. Air travel's a problem. So what I try to do is have longer vacations that are further apart. So I cut down the total number of flights I take. But
the rest of us don't have that sense of responsibility yet. But are you familiar with the Blue Planet research on this island?
A little bit, just from watching one of your prior meetings. I saw Hannah's presentation.
Okay, because in 2019,
appreciate.
Yeah, 2019. Hi, Peter. In 2019, there was a hosting of some Russian delegates for Open World Delegation, and so we went to different places, and I learned a lot. At Blue Planet, they're doing a lot of different things, and at that time, they talked about fuels for planes. There's research on this island for aquaculture, so that they were talking about algae fuel.
Right.
But what happened was they didn't get their big grant, and it makes me so sad because they're talking about closing down this program. The university systems are having budgetary issues, so they're talking about just closing these programs, and it's like anyway.
Well, that may change in a few weeks. There's going to be a lot more pressure to do significant R&D and actual programs, and then to use the COVID recovery funds to do a lot of the energy transition. So there is a lot of progressive talk coming out of the incoming administration, and we'll see if it results in restoring some of the good research like algae fuels, which I find them intriguing, and that would be a nice way to handle some air travel.
Because Doug, who was, he had to leave, he asked for your slides because he's our new research and development director for the county. And there's climate change specialists, but they have a renewable, what's they call him, energy specialist. And he's the deputy right now, in the assistant.
Okay.
Assistant.
Well, I'll send Maurice the latest version of the slides.
I think that would be appreciated. Doug Adams.
Yeah, Mitch, our mayor, who we were talking about earlier, who's also a Rotary member, not of our club, but a Rotary member of one of the other local clubs, just had the heart attack. But he's planning a sustainability summit coming up in a few months, I believe. So yeah, that's something I know they're doing a lot of research on, trying to put together. But as soon as I have more info, I'll definitely fill you in and get your ideas.
Right. Some of these solutions too, like that combined washer dryer, to me, it meets kind of an island sensibility of not having to transport as many white boxes around, being able to do more tasks with fewer devices.
Have you seen it, Maurice? I haven't seen it because I actually bought, we bought another set, but I haven't seen it we don't have those many outlets to purchase these things. So I'm thinking we'd have to have it on, like, online.
Right. So it seems like, kind of, to me, kind of an interesting take charge opportunity for Rotary members. If somebody orders some and shows people how it works, or you guys have if you had a facility, and if you were to put it into some laundromat, and so people could go test drive it at a laundromat.
Oh, I see. That's a good idea.
Yeah, there's different ways we need to get familiar with these new things so we can trust them enough to convert. My wife is slightly skeptical about the combined machine. She's saying, well, I had a friend who went to Europe 20 years ago and had a bad experience with one. So I'm trying to tell, okay, we've got new technologies.
I have two questions for you, Tom. One is on the replacement of these old technologies. Like, at what point do you replace them with something that's, more efficient? Because what goes into, creating a new one versus keeping the old one going for a while longer? What point in the curve do you cut your losses and get rid of it and put it into the ground, or you sell it to somebody else, or
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's fun to do the analysis on that kind of thing. Having done it a little bit with light bulbs, and it's easy. It actually makes sense if I've got if I can buy a $3 LED bulb that's only, I think, about 8 watts versus this other compact fluorescent I already own that does the same job at 15 watts. It actually makes sense to throw out the new compact fluorescent light just to recycle it and never use it. It would save me money because it wastes $15 worth of electricity across its life. Whereas here I'm holding this, or I'm able to buy a $3 bulb that doesn't waste $15. So it hurts my wallet to use that thing. And also resource wise, it hurts too to use the bad thing. So it's kind of interesting to do the analysis. One of the conclusions I have is we really want to give gasoline cars to young teenage male drivers. They will crash them for us and retire those cars. Do not give those young males any electric cars. we need to, the electric cars need to last a long time. So,
well, since one of the Pat who was on our screen here, Pat, they have a used car sales business as well. So I was wondering what his reaction, I was going to ask what his reaction was about the electric cars. It's not that they're unwilling to try different things. It's just that everybody's kind of stuck in in their lane and trying to
right. It is our instinct to use up resources. We are the descendants of the people who pulled the arrowhead out of the mammoth and reused it. The ones who left it in there, they don't actually have descendants. They ran out of arrowheads.
My other question was regarding our energy targets for Hawaii and the other states that have followed Hawaii. Those are set for like 2045. That's 25 years from now, 24 years from now.
They'll be adjusting those.
And the UN has said 9 years. So in drastic, what is drastic? Is drastic basically taking those targets and making them, in the next 5 years or next 8 years versus
probably the next 10 to 15. Yeah, but the 2045 was 25 years away. That people are going to be snugging those up. And it's easy for some smaller communities like my whole county here in San Mateo County. We're now getting 100% carbon-free energy. So it's hydroelectric and wind and solar. Those are the sources that our community utility commits to in their contracting. Now it's easy because we're part of a big grid and it sloshes around. And so when the wind's not blowing, we're using some fossil fuel from someone else's power plant. And then when the wind's blowing a lot, they're getting some of our excess wind power. So it sloshes back and forth. It's tougher on an island because you don't have neighbors you can exchange with who have diversity. You know, you guys are pretty much all in the same boat on each island.
Well, it's my understanding that the thermal geothermal plant that we have, PVG or PGV, I always forget the order, but they're actually, their goal is to produce enough for Oahu, and they've laid or started to lay the cables to energize Oahu from Hawaii. Right. So I know that is a long-term goal, and expected to happen over the next 20 years.
And I can imagine that would be controversial. One island supporting another.
Well, actually, we could do it for a while. It's just the politics.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the other. I was going to say that's the other thing about our ancestors. They were pretty tribal. You know, they look out for. Yeah, oh yeah, yeah. We're the descendants of fighters. That's what you see in the news.
100%. Well, thank you so much, Tom, for giving your talk and for be willing to do this and speak to our group. Greatly appreciated. Very informational. I got a lot out of it. I still have more questions, and I look forward to talking with you more and maybe having you come back if you'd like to.
Yeah. I definitely look forward to both things. Talking with you in particular about ways you might want to integrate this into what you do to become an electrification leader and demonstrator, and then to the club members about what they may want to do at their own homes and how the AMP diet can work, and then I want to hear from you guys too about how do Rotary principles interact with this, because I think you guys use some principles that can really help.
Actually, they added a focus area to include this. Mm-hmm. So it was just added. So in the environmental strategies and action, so it's all tying together, and everybody's going, okay, we understand this. So the question is really, I like your amoeba example, because it's not a matter of people don't know. Mm-hmm. They don't know what they can do with the amount of energy, when you're trying to juggle all these different things. Right. Most people aren't committed like Maurice, okay, in terms of, trying to do something that's really big. Most people want to say, look, I'm lucky if I compost, I'm lucky if I do this or that, or have solar or install PV. So
well, yeah, but we all have to start somewhere, and people are starting, and then they begin to identify with the progress, and they get a satisfaction from making progress, and just figuring out how do we work out the support networks where we enable, encourage, and support each other in making this kind of progress. And I think Rotary principles look like they can have a big tie into that. So that's why it's fun for me to get to meet you guys and to hopefully next time hear more about how you see tie-ins.
Oh, awesome. Thank you so much, Tom.
You're very welcome. Thank you. Thank you, Maurice. Charlene, talk to you later.
All right. Aloha.
Bye.
Bye, Charlene.
Bye. Thank you.